The North Atlantic in winter, 1000 CE. Waves the height of buildings crash against open hulls. Ice forms on the rigging, and the men's breath crystallizes in midair. For weeks, Viking crews face winds so cold they could kill a modern sailor in hours. They have no cabins, no shelter, no walls between them and the killing sea. Most remarkably of all, they have no way to make fire. So how did they keep their ships warm on the world's most treacherous waters, without a single flame? The answer will shatter everything we think we know about Viking survival and engineering. But how do we know this wasn't ignorance or myth? The answer comes from the ground itself, buried beneath a millennium of silt and salt. At Skuldelev, Denmark, 5 Viking ships were raised from the seabed in the early 1960s. Their timber still held the smell of tar and pine resin, but not a trace of ash. No hearthstones, no soot. No blackened metal rings where a cooking pot might have hung. Across all 5 vessels, nothing. The same pattern appears at Roskilde, where nearly 40 clinker-built hulls have been recovered and examined under microscope. Yet archaeologists found no burned surfaces, no fire scars on deck planks, no carbon residue in the bilge. If fire had ever burned there, the evidence would cling to the wood like a fingerprint. It doesn't. Oseberg, Norway, arguably the most ornate ship burial in history, offers the same silence. Gold thread, woolen tapestries, carved oars, even food stores survive, but no hearth, no cinder. The absence is total, consistent, deliberate. Ancient texts confirm what the dirt suggests. The Gulathing Law Code, one of the oldest Scandinavian legal records, states that fires shall not be lit aboard ships upon open waters. The saga of the Greenlanders describes long voyages where crews ate cold and slept under sail. These were not romantic embellishments. They were operational rules. Taken together, archaeology and text form a single truth. Vikings didn't avoid fire because they lacked it. They avoided it because they understood it. A Viking longship was a living engine of wood, resin, wool, and rope, materials that could carry flame faster than the crew could react. In a clinker-built hull, one spark could leap between overlapping planks like a fuse. The absence of fire was not deprivation, it was design. A system of calculated engineering where survival depended not on heat, but on control. It was a decision written not in superstition, but in strategy, a maritime logic refined through centuries of trial, error, and loss. To understand how they lived without it, we must now look closer, not at what they lacked, but at what they built instead. A Viking longship was a masterpiece of paradox. Light enough to carry across a beach, yet strong enough to survive the North Atlantic. Each hull was clinker-built. Long pine planks overlapped and fastened with iron rivets, sealed with layers of wool and resin. The design flexed and breathed with the waves, a living skeleton of wood and tar. But that same genius came with a silent enemy: fire. Tar, pitch, linseed oil, and wool, every substance aboard was fuel. Even the ropes, soaked in salt and animal fat, could ignite in seconds. The ships had no bulkheads, no compartments, no separation between crew, cargo, and hull. One ember from a cooking pot would not just burn, it would race. Heat would draw oxygen through the gaps of the overlapping planks, turning the hull itself into a chimney. Within 4 minutes, the fire could consume the entire ship. Experimental tests by maritime archaeologists in Roskilde confirmed it. A spark placed on a tar-sealed sample of Viking hull wood spreads a flame across 10 centimeters in under 30 seconds. The clinker seams, those elegant overlaps that made Viking ships fast, also made them fatal to any open flame. In such an environment, there was no safe place for heat. The deck was narrow. The sails hung low. Beneath, the bilge was a labyrinth of wood and oil. Imagine lighting a torch inside a dry barrel smeared with resin. That was the risk every crew would have faced. The Vikings knew it. Their sagas spoke not of flame, but of light, moonlight, starlight, reflected snow. In their engineering, avoidance was not fear, it was foresight. They turned vulnerability into law, and danger into doctrine. Fire was banned not because it was unknown, but because it was understood too well. What modern eyes see as primitive restraint was in truth a radical form of maritime safety, a calculus of survival where every plank and seam was weighed against the cost of a single spark. It wasn't that they lacked technology. They simply valued life over warmth, endurance over comfort, and control over chaos. To see how they survived without it, we must now descend into the system that replaced fire. A network of textiles, bodies, and rituals that generated warmth through cooperation, not combustion. What replaced fire aboard Viking ships was not a single invention, but a system. A web of textiles, bodies, and habits woven together into warmth. Textile engineering came first. Archaeological fibers recovered from Oseberg and Hedeby reveal a hierarchy of layers. Coarse wool for structure, soft-spun wool for insulation, and outer skins of seal or reindeer to block wind and spray. Every cuff and collar was hand-stitched shut each morning, a ritual act of sealing. The result was a microclimate worn directly on the body, capable of holding warmth even when soaked. Modern textile analysis shows Viking wool traps air as effectively as some modern synthetics, retaining thermal efficiency even at near-freezing humidity. In a storm, the clothing itself became a heat engine, powered not by flame, but by breath and friction. Social design amplified it. Crews slept in pairs or trios, wrapped inside double-layered hide bags called skinsec. Within those cocoons, shared body heat raised the internal temperature by nearly 15 degrees Celsius above ambient. Watch shifts rotated every 2 hours. As one pair rose, another took their place. The space never cooled entirely. The warmth passed from body to body like a living current. Spatial adaptation turned the ship into shelter. At dusk, the sail, woven of thick wool, was lowered and drawn over the deck like a tent. Beneath it, the crew lay on raised platforms above the bilge, away from the cold layer of trapped sea air. The hull, shaped like a shallow bowl, reflected their collective warmth back inward. The air smelled of tar, wool, and salt. A sensory reminder that survival here was communal architecture. Nutritional logic sealed the system. Each man consumed roughly 2,500 kilocalories a day. Dense, cold foods that required no fire. Hard bread, dried fish, porridge thickened with animal fat. The energy sustained thermogenesis, the body's own furnace. Across these 4 layers, textile, social, spatial, and nutritional, the Vikings built an ecosystem of warmth without flame. It was not improvisation, it was engineering of the body and the group. They transformed the absence of fire into a choreography of heat, a civilization synchronized to survive the cold through design, not desperation. Their ships were not floating camps, but symphonies of resilience. Each crew a living mechanism where discipline replaced technology, and cooperation replaced comfort. Fire did return to their world, but only on land. Along the ragged edges of Scandinavia stretched a hidden network of havens. More than 200 harbors mapped from Norway to the Shetland Isles. To the untrained eye, they look like mere coves or river mouths. To the Vikings, they were nodes in a living supply chain. A cold-weather infrastructure built on rhythm, not chance. At Roskilde Fjord, archaeologists have traced entire winter camps covering more than 50 hectares. The soil still holds the outline of longhouses, workshops, and vast cooking pits lined with stone. Here, the ban on fire lifted. Sparks rose from hearths, smoke curled through vented roofs, and the scent of tar mingled with roasted meat. Ships were hauled ashore, stripped, resealed, and stored. The crews repaired sails, reforged rivets, and shared food with farming settlements nearby. These bases were the warm lungs of a maritime empire, their only sanctioned spaces for flame. The rule was explicit: fire only on land. It wasn't superstition, it was systems engineering. By isolating combustion to fixed, controllable sites, they protected the fleet from catastrophe and kept every ship seaworthy for years. Each harbor functioned as a cycle of repair, rest, and renewal. When spring returned, the same vessels that had survived freezing seas launched again with minimal decay, a form of sustainability long before the word existed. Evidence from the trading hub of Hedeby shows this network doubled as economic infrastructure. Workshops produced iron nails, wool garments, and barrels of dried fish bound for distant voyages. The maritime world of the Vikings was not random raiding. It was logistics at continental scale. Even faith mirrored function. Stone hearths were often ringed with carvings of serpents, symbols of control over destructive forces. Fire was revered, but quarantined, honored as a god only when safely caged in earth. This boundary between sea and shore, between control and chaos, defined Viking power. They didn't conquer the cold by defeating it. They built a civilization that worked with it, one where discipline, coordination, and respect for danger became a shared creed. Their mastery of logistics was not just technical, it was moral. To light a fire at sea was to betray the collective. To wait until shore was to honor survival itself. To see the Vikings clearly, we must look beyond them. Across the Mediterranean in the same era, sailors burned wood and oil aboard their galleys. They cooked hot meals, forged metal repairs, and prayed to fire for warmth. But they also burned with it. Archaeological records from Byzantine wrecks in the Aegean show hulls blackened from within, fires that started at sea and never reached shore. Where southern engineers embraced flame, northern ones forbade it. The difference was not ignorance, it was environment. The North Atlantic punished mistakes instantly. Centuries later, modern sailors would rediscover this truth. In 2007, the Sea Stallion from Glendalough, a full-scale replica of a Viking longship, sailed from Denmark to Ireland. The crew endured storms, freezing spray, and weeks of damp cold. They carried no stoves, no heaters. They ate cold rations, shared hides, and slept under a lowered sail. Thermal sensors placed on board recorded body temperatures stabilizing within a narrow range. Proof that the ancient method worked. What began as an archaeological experiment became a revelation. Technology was never missing. It had been replaced by cooperation. In every line of their design lay a philosophy: control over comfort, endurance over ease, collective over individual. Fire symbolized power, but also dependence. By rejecting it, Viking sailors freed themselves from fragility. They built ships that could not burn, habits that could not collapse, and societies that trusted discipline more than desire. The Mediterranean taught humanity to harness flame. The North taught it to live without. One path sought mastery through domination, the other through adaptation. Both changed the world, but only one could sail frozen seas. They chose capability over warmth, safety over comfort, cooperation over isolation. In the end, that choice defined them, not the raids, not the myths, but the intelligence of survival itself. They were not barbarians fighting nature. They were strategists redesigning it. And in their silence, the cold, fireless night of the North Atlantic, we glimpse a truth older than technology, that the measure of civilization is not what it invents, but what it learns to live without. The ice is quiet now, but within its silence lies the echo of every hand that built, rode, and endured. The Vikings never sought to conquer nature. They sought to understand their place within it. We light our fires higher now, cities, engines, data. Yet their lesson remains, colder, truer, older. Civilization is not measured by what we create, but by what we learn to live without. They mastered survival not to rule the world, but to belong to it. And in that belonging, their wisdom endures. A quiet fire, still burning beneath the ice.